Hey there. Morning. Hope you're doing well. Indra, how you doing?
Hey, good morning, Bobby. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I got up very early today because I couldn't sleep, so just lots on my mind and things to talk about. But hope we can get folks in the room today because I posted a couple hours ago, but didn't see anybody like click the reminder. But we'll see if other people are coming into the room. Okay, looks like some folks are coming in, and we'll get started shortly in a moment. Um, I want to welcome everyone for being here today, and thanks so much for coming by. Today, we're going to talk about how to empower more diversity, equity, inclusion in work and life. Part of it's because of Black History Month, and diversity inclusion is a big thing nowadays too that people are talking about more recently. So I thought it'd be a good topic to kind of get into. Andrea, what do you think of the topic?
I think it's pretty interesting. It always fascinates me how, this can be applied.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So with that, I think what I'll do is I'll ping a few people to join us, and I'll also make sure the other people who are here as part of the co-hosts can be part of the conversation. And yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. I mean, the reason why it's important to me is that in all aspects of my life, I look at diversity, equity, inclusion, and I try to, uh, support different groups and marginalized groups, as well as try to empower voices, try to hear stories, and try to find a way to improve the diversity in my own life, as well as the diversity of other organizations and groups out there that maybe are lacking that. So I think having a conversation about that, I think, will go a long way to getting it done, but also putting it out there and calling it out and trying to be better because diversity, equity, inclusion is a huge hot topic on LinkedIn. It's a topic on Twitter. It's a topic in our workplaces. It's a topic in our homes. I mean, my kids are mixed kids, so I look at them and I think about how they're going to navigate this world and overcome the challenges that they will clearly face. And I think that there's challenges for a lot of people, but that's why I think it's important to have that discussion. So with that, I'm going to start DMing a couple people, and I encourage you to ping to retweet the tweet that's in the nest above. That way, we get more people in the room. You can also DM people with the arrow button on top, and also click on the bubble, the conversation bubble below, and you can share your questions in the bubble, or you can come up on stage and you can be part of the conversation. So that's really what I wanted to share today. And with that, I'll move it to Indra and then Melanie to start with your introductions.
Thank you so much, Bobby. So, hello everyone. I'm Indra Bartona. I'm a producer in film and television. I'm also a TV host and the founder of the Positivity Vibe Tribe, a global community. And we also have actually the home of the positivity, the main home is actually here on Twitter. So we do have a page dedicated to the Positivity Vibe Tribe. What we do is two spaces a week, one on Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and one on Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So they vary in topics, talking about gratitude, about law of attraction, about how to live a positive life. So that's in a nutshell what it's all about. So hope you all can join us this week. Over to you, Melanie.
Thank you, and happy Monday, everyone. So, yes, my name is Melanie Mitchell Wexler. I am a career coach, LinkedIn strategist, and a job search expert. I was a recruiter for over 20 years and worked in over 20 plus industries, helping individuals land their jobs, but also working with the hiring managers. And now work with my career professionals and really showing them how to navigate the job search how to navigate their job search from behind the scenes and working with recruiters and accelerate that. So definitely a topic that is a big concern too to my clients. Very much every day. I have some sort of conversation surrounding this with at least one person. So I'm excited to have today's conversation. Bobby?
Thanks, Melanie. Good to hear from you. My name is Bobby Omar. I'm a professional speaker by trade for the last 17 years. I've traveled around the world, delivered 1,000 keynotes and workshops across 4 continents. I'm a 5-time TEDx speaker, and I focus on helping people get clarity with their personal brand and help them build a thought leadership brand through digital presence, meaningful conversations, storytelling and speaking, mindset confidence, and and getting a clear and basically their personal brand. So that's what I focus on. And the topic is meaningful to me, and I'll start with a little story, which is when did I first realize I was different? I'll start with that thing, which is I remember a long time ago. Um, I remember a long time ago when someone had pointed out to me that I looked different. I think I was like 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, and I was a little bit surprised by that because I grew up in Canada, born and raised here, and I never really took much thought to it. And it was pointed out to me multiple times over the years by various individuals, and usually kids, because kids are a little bit on the playground. It's not always nice. And then I started noticing it also when I became a youth and adult, and that also became a time where I was more. I noticed more, the fact that I'm a person of color, and I have a different background. I have different. I'm a little bit diverse compared to my other friends. And then what I can tell you is that I'm a very good. I'm really good at fitting in. So I can talk to people of all sorts of beliefs and faiths and creeds. My wife often says you're really good at being a chameleon, talking to people that are different than you, even people who have different values and different politics than me, which is also another interesting thing. And so I think and that thus my name Bobby was a name that I was given by people that my parents took on and added to my birth certificate. My real name is actually Rehan, but my parents, I had someone name me that, and pretty soon everyone called me Bobby, and now I identify with it. But at the same time, I was someone who always tried to fit in and mingle with the crowd and not be a shit disturber and things like that. And it was only more recently in the last 10 years where I started to realize, what? The thing that really, really got me to start to be more vocal about who I was and where I came when actually was 9/11. I remember that specifically because all of a sudden the amount of rhetoric I got against me was like, whoa, this is what's going on here. Like I'm Canadian. I'm westernized, born here. Like, what's the big deal? And over the years, I started to realize, and I'll be very frank with you guys, there were certain aspects of me that were I was kind of an apologist for certain things. I saw nothing wrong with being called Bobby versus being my original name Rehan. I remember initially not having an issue with Apu from Simpsons, and then later on, I started to realize, what? As I educated myself, maybe I do have an issue with this. And I remember watching an episode of the Patriot Act on Netflix with Hassan Minaj. And now at the time he was called Hassan Minaj because he was a correspondent on the Daily Show, and then he had the show, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Hassan Minaj from the Patriot Act. Welcome to my Netflix show." And he told the story about how he was he was in the audience. He was talking on stage, and his parents were in the audience, and he was so excited to have his parents there. And when he announced his name as Hassan Minaj, he said the look on his mom's face killed him, because not only was he mispronouncing his name, he was mispronouncing both his names. It wasn't Hassan, it's Hassan. It wasn't Minaj, it was Minaj. And he was changing it for the audience to, I guess, better acclimatize to whatever it might be. And that really moved me, because for years I've been a professional speaker, and I've traveled around the world, and I've talked to people, and I always introduce myself as Bobby Umar. You know, I'm saying my last name wrong. That's not what my mom says. It's not what my dad says, or my grandparents, or my family. It's Omer. And what's funny is I say my kid's name. Oh, my son is Niall Omer. My daughter's Ryan Omer. Even my wife is Ananda Omer. But I say Bobby Umar. What the hell's wrong with me? I don't get it. So I started making an effort to just start saying Omer more than Umar, because Omer is correct. And so even for myself, I struggled at times to include myself and to be more diverse, to empower who I was, and be true to who I am, and encourage others to try to pronounce my name properly. And now, not everyone could do it, and that's fine. But if they want to learn how to do it, I try to teach them. It's Omer, not Umar. It's Omer. And and I think that that's something that I've been changing in my life, to be more inclusive and diverse. And so it's interesting to see the journey that I've had in doing so. And then I think now, having been on Twitter for many, many years, you see the issues and challenges of diversity and inclusion. I mean, I know it happens at work and happens in life, but diversity and inclusion is something that a lot of people um, struggle with. And I think it just starts by listening, and it starts by empathizing, and it starts by trying to understand where people are coming from. And the best way to do that is through hearing their stories. And so for me, I will spend a lot of time on Twitter, particularly retweeting and sharing stories of people that are sharing the stories of their diverse lives and the challenges they have, whether they're marginalized, they're oppressed, or they have issues with what they're going through. So for me, this topic now has more meaning for me, because I've been kind of taking it more on. Partially because of the network of people that I hang out with. I think that's certainly influenced me. It's definitely been an issue that's come up because of my kids who are now growing up. They're 12 and 14, and they're mixed kids, and they're growing up in a very in a challenging world, and so I have to be mindful of that. So I thought we'd have the discussion today to understand how we can empower each other more in our work, in our lives, to overcome the challenge that we have. What are some of the things that we feel are a challenge for us? I hope people can come and share stories and share challenges. And if you're willing to come up on stage and ask a question or share an insight, I'd love to have you on here. And if you like this conversation, I encourage you to retweet the tweet in the nest above. I encourage you to ask questions, come up on stage, ask questions in the bubble box there in the bottom right corner. You can click the arrow button and retweet people and tell people, hey, we're talking about this, and tag me, and tag Indra, tag Melanie. And that way, when we see it, then we'll retweet to our followers, and then more people come to the room. So I share that story because I wanted to, I guess, tell you that we all have our unique journeys, and none of us are perfect, and we're all learning to be better. And so that's what I wanted to start with. And I guess maybe I could. I'd love to turn over to Indra and then Melanie to see if they want to share any story of something in terms of where they've seen challenges, or where they first noticed the challenges for themselves, growing up, or maybe what are some of the challenges they see now. And I'd love to get their take too. Yep. Indra,
Yeah,
go ahead.
sure, Bobby. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story. Um, I think mine is similar, as in just at school, I really noticed the challenges, and I remember there were a lot of times at school where I would just have no friends, and I would just get used to eating lunch by myself, and sometimes and I really noticed it. I guess it was around five or six, seven. That was the most difficult times. And so even though I was I would just keep trying to sit with the group of girls and hang out and follow people around like a stalker. I, kind of a strong personality, and so I think I also, I just kind of would not take no for an answer. But also, I grew up in Australia and it's not multicultural. And even in the creative space, there were so many challenges that I had so many friends saying, you should just go to LA if you want to do more of those creative projects as well, because, over here, they're just, it isn't, it isn't like that. And so I noticed it was mainly in school, and I think it's because maybe it's just part of the education system that other children aren't used to um, seeing different people, different looking people, and it was difficult, but I really never noticed it so much as an adult. I think things started to kind of change, but also, um, you know, very early after graduation, I was also getting jobs. I was working in London, which is a very diverse place again. Um, and then over in the US and DC and kind of working between that and around Europe. So I wasn't in Australia, which is where I noticed it. And I did notice it even um, after after I had graduated and I was doing some of the TV hosting work. It isn't that easy because I think it's just the way the culture is. Whereas I actually feel more comfortable in the US because there are a lot more. It's more of a mixing pot, I feel. So I do feel more comfortable here, but I don't let it, ever kind of, I never even growing up as a child, I never let it hold me back. Um, that maybe I was different because I think we're all different. Um, and I mean, I'd be curious to hear how Melanie works with clients because um, I mean, I don't really notice it so much in the business because it's more about who can do the job well. And it just ends up being very mixed and diverse because there are so many talented people that it never really enters my mind nowadays, as it did when I was growing up. So I found that that's a difference as well. And it looks like society has really changed. And no matter who you are, most of the time, I feel welcome, and I always make everybody else, feel as welcome as possible. Um, Over to you, Melanie.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think I have to preface it like I'm a Midwestern girl. I was born and raised in Missouri, um, middle of the United States. For those that even in the United States that don't even know where Missouri is, and I grew up with a mom who was very liberal and who was very wide open, and so it was really interesting that I didn't really understand that we had I understood that we had differences and that there were different struggles. Like that was kind of that was reiterated to me from a very young age. But my mom always had a very open door policy, so like everybody was welcome in our home. And I did not grow up in a racially diverse state. If you go to Missouri, you'll see the state itself is very red, very, very red in political terms. And so, it's interesting though, growing up, it was kind of like I was in a little bit of a bubble, but it was a very inclusive bubble. And so, I mean, when I was, my mom was very big on education. She taught special ed and early childhood education. She's actually the first, her thesis was implemented to get breakfast implemented in all of the Missouri schools. And that was solely because of the impoverished and specifically um, the African American population was very much hurting at that time and not having the resources to have free food and free educate. You're having the education you need for the food. I'm not explaining that right, but if you even go back further, I grew up, as a little kid, I grew up in San Francisco. I was surrounded by um, a very openly gay drag queen environment. I was kind of like, when my mom was going to school, those were my babysitters. So again, I have this like really I always kind of wacky childhood from that sense. But then we went back to Missouri, which is, you can imagine, very much the night and day. So it took me a long time kind of as an adult to really understand what other people see and how other people are, like that wasn't the norm. That wasn't the norm, to have an understanding and an education from your parents about what it was, what it's like for other people, and to always be open minded for that. So I think, which is, I think I've have kind of continued to struggle with, being able to not, or understanding how naive I actually was in a lot of situations. Um, but also understanding my privilege that I've been, given. Of course, there's still struggles as women that we see. One of the things that Indra mentioned, is what we talk about from our clients, and or from working with my clients. One of the things I can say is, unfortunately, when it comes to corporate America, I have witnessed, I have been spoken to firsthand by hiring managers, that have, when I was recruiting for them, that they would not hire certain people, whether that was based on their race, their age, their, whatever category. I've, had explicit conversations, and there's, I've had to fire clients because of those statements. I've had to walk away from them. But the reality is, there's other people there that will support that. And so there's still struggles. And, it is something that I always say, I get very irritated and frustrated that we continue to put the onus, if I put my career coaching hat on, we can continue to put the onus on the candidate to overcome these biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious. And the reality is that onus needs to be placed on the corporations and the companies to do the proper education and the proper change, which is massive. It's not something that you can just say, "Oh, we have a DEI policy, and we're inclusive," and that's not enough. It's really instrumental, like break it down to its bare bones and rebuilding it, because it's a mentality, but it starts from within. So I, as a kid, I had a very different, obviously different childhood than most people do. So I see things kind of differently. Um, as a natural empath, I feel things very differently about situations, and just hope that, by having more and more conversations, that we can, bridge gaps in terms of understanding. So I'm going to pass it back over to Bobby.
Yeah, I mean, both of you said some really amazing things and interesting things, and so much to unpack here, which obviously we're not going to cover it all of it today. But a couple of things that come to mind. And again, if people want to come on stage and share their thoughts or share their story or ask questions, I invite you to do this. Um, number one that hit home for me is that I was trying to make the point that during my adulthood, I started to just focus so much on my career and my kids and just elevating myself and kind of fitting in, that I neglected to see what was out there. And so now, more recently, we that's something that happens to a lot of us. Those of us who are actually have, like, your people of color, whatnot. We sometimes get caught up in that. And so now I've been becoming more cognizant and educating myself on all the different systemic things that are happening to people, whether they're women or they're queer or they're black or indigenous or people of color. Like, it's actually, and I that's why I shared the story about me being not focusing so much about my last name Umar and saying, no, it's Omar. But now, no, you know what? It's pronounced Omar. So why should I not say that? I should just stand up and say this the way it is. So for me, that's an interesting piece, because I think even those of us like me, uh, many of us don't think about this, don't do a good enough job of recognizing what's going on out there at work and at home. The second thing that I think is interesting is, I think Indra mentioned the America has this thing called the Great American Melting Pot. So the idea is that everyone's there together, and we're all, doesn't matter what your backgrounds are, but you're all part of the greater whole type thing. And there's a different philosophy in Canada, actually. It's called the cultural mosaic. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but basically, and so we differentiate ourselves from the cultural mosaic to the American melting pot. And the difference is really that the only difference there is that instead of, in Canada, instead of, coming in and being like everybody else, we say, no, no, showcase and demonstrate who you are and your diversity and your culture and your language and your philosophies, and you're part of the overall mosaic of who we are, and not we're not trying to have you blend in. So it's a different philosophy, but I also think that's also something that both groups struggle with, right? The melting pot philosophy, a lot of people struggle with it. The mosaic piece, a lot of people struggle with it. And so it's like, how do we find a way to, and for me, it's like, I'm certainly happy to be part of a larger community, but I'm also very mindful of the things that separate me or are part of the intersection of who I am, whether it's, uh, you know, being male or being Muslim or being brown, or whatever it might be. Those are the things that, make me different and are part of, who I am. But I think it's also important to know that these challenges people have, are tough, and so it's really important for us to have those conversations. And I think the number one thing is to have conversations like this. Number two, I think that we should be doing everything we can to encourage more stories of people in the workplace, in life, around what they're doing, what they're going through, the challenges they're facing. Uh, and to Melanie's point, policy is one thing. Having a policy in your workplace, yeah, we support DEI. That's great, but if you don't actually do anything about it, then are you acting on it, or you just have some sort of poster on the wall and you're doing nothing with it? I think that also becomes an issue too, because I've seen a lot of organizations that talk about culture. They talk about who they are and what they do. But when you really dive deep into the actions of what they're doing, are they actually doing things to encourage and champion, support, equity, diversity, and inclusion? So that's something I think Indra and Melanie gave some really great stories around that. Now we have a couple people join us on stage. We're going to go one at a time, and I think we'll go with MJ first, or Mary Jo. Thanks so much for being on stage. Please go ahead and share your thought or comment or question.
Hello, thank you so much, Bob and Indra. Thanks for sharing your stories, and to others. I actually just happened upon this space. I'm actually supposed to be doing some work, but it's nice to have something to listen to while I'm doing some other things that I don't need full, brain power for, kind of thing.
مرحبا
I'm.
مرحبا بالجميع أصدقائي
Oh, sorry. Is someone else speaking?
أنا
Can I go ahead,
It's
Bobby?
okay.
I'm not sure. I
Yeah,
hear
go ahead.
someone else as
Go
well.
ahead.
I'm not sure.
No, MJ,
Okay.
go ahead. I removed him
Oh,
because if he's going to interrupt people, then I'm not going to really allow him to speak on
okay.
stage. So I'll let you can DM me, but if you want to speak on stage, we again, inclusion means we listen to each other and we take turns. Okay, so keep that in mind. Look like it's gone. There you go. MJ,
Okay, I
go ahead.
appreciate it. Thanks. So I'm one half of, we're called the Resistors too. One half of a pair that runs a Twitter Spaces, weekly Twitter Spaces, and we started it about a year ago, really just to create a space for women and those who identify as, to share their inspiring stories and incredible maybe courageous battles, challenges, anything we found of interest. And it was for people of all backgrounds, careers, etc. Right, but we found last fall that we were really seeing a massive chasm between what the realities were and what was actually being shared with the public about COVID-19. So we had ended up dedicating a few episodes to having some credible guests on to help inform our listeners about these realities and things. And then it's turned into actually now where we are this week doing our 20th episode about it. So I'm not here to, argue with anyone about the state of COVID, because I know there may be people here who are living along the lines of COVID is over and that, but more so to just ask anyone here for whom diversity and inclusion is truly something they value and support, which I'm assuming people here are, and do think that way, is just to continue to consider how disproportionately negatively affected the racialized, marginalized, and immunocompromised communities continue to be by COVID spread. And just to ask anyone who, at least even at the minimum, are still providing virtual options in your workplaces or at events, et cetera, to consider taking it a step further to find ways to make in-person living and working and celebrating, like pretty much existing, possible for everyone, because what we're witnessing, a lot of people in these categories really just being left to a life of virtual existence, like in perpetuity, because the rest of the world has, decided to move on. So whenever I see titles of equity and inclusion, I'm finding my voice to actually just ask people to, you really, really need, unless you really consider that COVID is still around, and the stats do show, it's the number one killer. It's more people died and were hospitalized last year than ever before, all that. Then it needs to be part of the conversation, as awkward as it is. And so anyway, I just appreciate you letting me have this moment to share my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, MJ, for that. I really appreciate what you said, and a couple of ways. One is, I mean, number one, when it comes to issues like COVID or health, when it comes to issues like education, there's so many different issues around where systemic injustice or systemic racism or bias and prejudices are there against so many people, particularly Black, Indigenous people, women. Like there's so much stuff out there. So I think that's an important conversation to have, how it affects everyone in so many different ways, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's in the home, or whether you're trying to get uh, daycare for your kid. Like all these things come up all the time. And so, and yeah, the COVID thing is interesting because my brother just got COVID for the first time, after 3 years, and his wife, who was a respiratory therapist, got it too. So they had been, it's certainly there, and yeah, it's around, and it's still affecting a lot of us. And all of a sudden, my wife's like, "Man, when did we last get our shots?" And we're like, "Oh shoot, it's September. It's been over 6 months. It's been 6 months. We better go make an appointment and get another booster." So we're thinking about those things, and it just came up actually this morning. We were talking about it. So, and then the other point I think is really interesting is the idea that yeah, the inclusion aspect of those who are in a particular situation that you said, which is like, for example, people who are immunocompromised, right? Like my mother is immunocompromised. And so when people ask me, well, why are you, like, there's people on Twitter saying, well, why are you doing so much for, I was like, yeah, if you know my mom and you know she has kidney failure and she has diabetes and she's really old, and of course I'm going to go through every possible way to protect the mom I love, right? And so far so good. She hasn't, she has, and her health is deteriorating this last year and a half. She's starting to lose her memory, and every time I call her now, she's talking about something that she's worried about, her health. And it's really hard to hear sometimes. She's 78 years old, and I love her so much, but like, it's hard to hear, and I want to protect. And she hasn't gotten COVID. In the first few months, she was like, and she was depressed because she was home, and she's very social like me, and I call her to try to cheer up, but and she hesitated in the beginning, but then we said, no, mom, you gotta protect yourself, and so now she's really good about that, and we really appreciate that about her, and so I can, like, the immunocompromised is a perfect example of people again who are being shut out of life, and that's another way where we need to be better about inclusion and equity, particularly in those situations. So, thanks for sharing that, Indra and Melanie. Any comments on that?
Yeah, thanks so much, MJ, for coming up and being part of the space. And I think the thing is that something that you touched on, that Melanie and Bobby touched on, is about communication and how important it is. And hey, before I go on, I just want to thank my buddies for joining us. I have my partners that are partners with the Positivity Vibe Tribe, Bunsen and Beaker. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Success Minded. We partner on a space on Thursdays, and it's really amazing. So I hope you all join us. And thank you to Stephen Caggiano, who is one of our co-hosts in the Positivity Vibe Tribe. So thank you so much, guys, for joining, and looking forward to hearing any of your thoughts. Um, but I just wanted to focus on the communication part, Bobby, because I think it's something that we've all touched on, and it's about communicating, like in a fair and equitable way. about, how to, I guess, um, serve the population to its best so that, there's like a balance between everything. Um, and the thing is, sometimes I almost feel like it's not about, you know, um, the actual state of, wherever you live or anything else. It's just there's going to be also, in my experience, good and bad people. And that is just how things are. Um, and it's not even about anything else. And it also goes deeper than that, that sometimes it's about unhappy people. Um, and you hear that because the way that they communicate their messages and everything else, just some people are unhappy and and it goes deep to the root and it affects them on so many different levels. And sometimes it comes out in different ways of um, not being equitable. So I just also want to put those thoughts out there. Back to you, Bob.
Yeah, Melanie, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, MJ, thank you for bringing that up because I actually just talked to a former client of mine. She's immunocompromised. I can never say that properly, but and right now she's employed, but not in a good situation because we feel like because she is not able to come back to the office and feel like she's pretty much being targeted. And it's done a number on her mindset, of course. So she's been actively looking for a new opportunity, and of course, now we're seeing a lot of companies pushing back to going back into the office full time. I mean, we're seeing that, and she's feeling like, do I disclose this to a recruiter immediately? How do I, so we had to, I worked with her on Friday actually to come up with some things that she hadn't thought about of ways to approach and navigate her job search. But it is definitely it goes back to that, inclusion piece. It goes back to that, even that equity piece of, how are we treating, how are we considering our coworkers in these situations? And how are we, what are our policies and are we being fair, across the board? And when that comes to that, so I just want to say thank you for bringing that up because I literally I mean, like I said, there's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't talk to somebody about ageism, racism, in this case, her health. And so literally, I mean, I have these conversations probably in some way, shape, or form every single day with a job seeker that's either experiencing it within their own current situation and they don't know how to get out, or they're experiencing it from the job search standpoint. So it's a very real struggle that people are going through.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. Appreciate that. And I want to give a shout out to. I put a couple of tweets in the nest above. One from Bunsen and Beaker about loving the space because hey, I love it when people love the space. That's a good thing. And I think that if you like what you're hearing or you like this conversation, please put it out there, tweet it out there, tweet to your followers. You can retweet the stuff that I put in the nest, and that way we can get more people in the room because that's going to help the conversation. And then also, Miss Super Nerd, I also shared her tweet too, which is really good to really start the discussion and facilitate greater discussion. So thanks so much for that. Swapnil has his hand up, and we'll see what he has to say first, and then we'll go to Bunsen and Beaker. Go ahead, Swapnil.
Hello everyone, I'm Swapnil Patle. My question is that how I can improve my communication skill. Can anyone give me the tips to improve my communication skill?
Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, the general thing with communication skills, and I mean, it might be a little bit off topic, but it certainly will help you when you start to build your career out there and build your brand. But a big way to work on your communication skills is to, number one, identify what are the challenges that we're having when it comes to communications. Communication has many things. Communication can be how we speak, how we write. It can be how we listen. Are we active listening? Things like that. Number two, putting into practice different techniques to try to improve upon it. Like the more you practice, people often ask me, how do I become a professional speaker? Well, I wasn't trained to be a speaker. I just spoke a lot, and the more I spoke, the more the better I became with practice in doing so. The other thing, of course, is to, working with a coach or a community to help you improve those different areas. There are many people out there who, when they work in communication skills, I mean, back in the day, I used to run communication workshops and things like that. There are lots of ways you can actually, work on that with a coach or with a program to try and do it. But I think the biggest way to work in communication is to continue practicing and keep working on that and finding and identifying what are the issues and challenges that are coming up when it comes to your communication. Be willing to put yourself out there and actually ask questions. Hey guys, I'm trying to become a better communicator. I'd love to get your feedback from your friends or network. Like you can post on LinkedIn or Twitter and see what they say. Um, but I don't want to spend too much time on this because it is away from the topic a little bit. So um, I'm going to, if Indra and Melanie have something they want to add, you're more than welcome to, or just put your hand up. Otherwise, I'm going to go over to Bunsen and Beaker and have them speak. So Bunsen Burner, go ahead with your question or comment today.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I am in between classes, so I will be as quick as possible. Normally, I can't talk during the day, but I saw this pop up. Great space. It's not a question; it's more of a comment, and it's on the lines of equity and inclusion. I run a podcast called the Science Podcast, and through the conversations with scientists, and one of our directives was to highlight women scientists and people underrepresented in the STEM fields on our show. I had my eyes opened to all of the challenges that somebody like me, like a white guy from Canada, just doesn't have the same challenges. And I think conversations are where you learn and you grow. So, like, in the 5 years that I've been running the show and talking to all of these amazing scientists, and then they openly talk about things that they've struggled with, from being the only person of color in the entire room of scientists to being disabled and not being able to get to a job site. Like, if you are a paleontologist and you have connective tissue issues, you're not going to be able to hike out into the middle of a desert and dig up a dinosaur the same way that people who are not disabled can. So I think just having these conversations is really, really powerful. And I had just one thing I was thinking about the other day is I presented I presented to some teachers, because my day job, I'm a teacher. I presented to some teachers at this big conference in Calgary, and in talking to one of the scientists who is disabled, they said it's so easy to think about including people, and we talked about how when I speak, I don't have, or in the past I haven't had an interpreter, like a sign language person, right? And I was like, oh my god, like I'm not including anybody that is hard of hearing or deaf. Like, they would just not, I would just be totally taking them out of the picture of being included in my talk. So I did ask, and they did have a signer there in case somebody was hard of hearing. There was nobody, so they canceled the signer, but it just took the ask from me to think about that. And so anyways, I'm rambling a bit, but I'm just, I'm pretty passionate about this, and thank you for holding this space.
Yeah, I'm glad you have it here. Thanks so much. Melanie, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, first off, thank you for holding the spaces that you do, because I am a mother of a 20-year-old who is a forensic chemistry major. She's in her sophomore spring semester of her sophomore year, and when she decided to go down this path, she's often surrounded by. She does go to a university that is very kind of forward thinking. So there are a few more females in her classes, but often she is the only female in some of her higher level chemistry and mathematic classes. But so as we kind of approach International Women's Month, I'm a big advocate for women in STEM. And as a young child at 14, her goal is to actually work for the FBI and we're already starting on that internship road. So I'm going to definitely have her check you out, because she's always looking for inspiration. But, she's the girl that said, one day I'll go from being a forensic chemist to running being the first female director of the FBI, which has never happened in over maybe 75, 80 years of its existence. So, still got some ways to go there, but I just want to say appreciation for that. So that you're advocating in that space.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. And again, I'm very happy to see so many people in this room, and some people that I know: Stephen, Sarah, Dan, Daniel, lots of people here. If you want to come on stage and share a thought or ask a question, we'd love to hear from you. The more diverse voices we hear, the better off we're going to be. That's why it's important to have you guys all be part of this conversation. And I think I want to what I want to get into is, we talk about how to empower more diversity, and like, I think there's a lot of challenges. I see it all the time. I see it on LinkedIn. I see it on Twitter. I see it on Facebook. I see it on Instagram, TikTok. You name it. Everywhere we go, there's all these issues around this. And I like to look at there's certain examples where I think people have a hard time with. And I'll give an example from my own community. So, I'm Muslim, and there are people within my Muslim community and in my family who are what I call niqabi. Now, if you don't know what that is, there are women who wear a headscarf, okay, and that's called hijabi. They wear the hijab. And many of my family, including my mom, my sister, wear a hijab when they go outside. So that's their choice. That's what they're doing. Then there's what's called niqabi, which is there are women, Muslim women, who cover their face when they go outside. And for some people, it seems like a very, very extreme position, and it looks very jarring to them. And they have trouble with it because it's so different. Okay, fair enough. I get it. But, who are these people? Who are these women? And, there's such a small number of women who are niqabi, yet there's so many rules, and there's laws being passed now in Quebec and Canada, where they're trying to, push them into, basically what they're doing is they're putting laws that are basically pushing them back into their homes and not allowing them to, be part of society, which I think is terrible. But the thing I tell people is, I actually have a cousin who's niqabi, and she is the sweetest of all my cousins, all my first cousins. She's the sweetest, kindest, most amazing, lovely person, and she never judges me, never preaches. She's just so much full of. All she wants to do is live her life and live her faith the way she wants. And most of them are like this. They're all, and it's such a small amount of people. But I tell people, if you want to really understand what's going on, take the time to listen to these people and their stories. When you look at things that you think are different from you, or you think some people say they're extreme, or it's very different from the way you are. I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's not that hard to listen. It's not that hard to try to understand how people are feeling, what's going on. I use the exact same philosophy for those who, for some reason are not trying to are against trans people. I think it's absolutely outrageous. No one knows all the challenges they go through, and how marginalized and this group is. But just take the time to listen to them, listen to their stories, try to understand where they're coming from. Especially, sometimes you can talk to parents, like when you hear stories of parents of trans kids and how they navigated the difficult journey of a parent. Because as a parent, I have two young kids, and if one of them had that trouble, I'd want to do everything I can to protect them and save them from harm and to support them and nurture them. And God, like, none of us want to see our kids suffer or go through terrible things. And so when I see stories of parents doing that too, again, very, very moving. They're very moving stories. And so for me, that's the biggest thing. Can you listen with empathy versus listening to refute? Can you, and ask yourself these three questions of empathy that are important. Number one, can I understand what they are feeling? Number one. Number two, can I understand why they are feeling this way? Number two. And then finally, number three, how can I best support those feelings? And that's the hardest one. That's the one that a lot of people, you see lawmakers in some states in the US that are, passing laws that are against women, against trans people. It's really challenging. But if you take the third question, I mean, they don't understand. They obviously, can you understand what they're feeling? In many cases, they don't. Can you understand why they're feeling that way? In many cases, they don't. But more importantly, how can I support those feelings? Because if you can just listen and if you can just support, you wouldn't be passing those laws that, prevent them from accessing certain things. So for me, that third question is so important. How can I support those feelings? So when I look at my Nakabi friend, how can I support what she needs and what she's looking for? When I look at other people, how can I support what they're doing? For me, as a person, as a human, as a worker, as in the workplace or in life, or even in your family, if you had someone in your family that you love and support and are really, really you care a lot about them, and I use my own children as an example, and if they were going through something like this, what would I do or how could I support those feelings? I would do everything I could to support those feelings. So that's just my first kind of take on how we can try to advocate for more diversity, equity, inclusion. Indra, Melanie, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, Bobby. And I think the thing is that to have empathy um, is in general just a good thing to have for other people. It's not always easy for us, particularly if we're having our own struggles and challenges, but it certainly is something that is very powerful. And also to remember, I mean, what I think is a little bit sad is sometimes, when we see the inequity between um, all the different people that are around us. Um, and so it's not what we're really expecting. It's between, you know, um, the different races, and that's sometimes a little bit disappointing for me to see because I sort of, growing up as a Christian, I think that we're all God's children, so we should all be equal, in every single aspect, not just because, there's too many of a certain type of people that go to this that are accepted to a certain university, so they have to make it, more equal, but it's not. There's all these different things that, I mean, I've just been observing, and I mean, it's even happened to me from other races where I'm not a certain race, and I've actually been really taken back because it's been from well, I would say cousins, cousins, brothers and sisters from other races, and that's where I think I was just I have been a little bit taken back when it's not equitable. I'm expecting it from a different group of people sometimes, and when I have experienced that, I was just remembering something. And that's when I think it's a little bit disappointing because I'm expecting those people to actually understand even more so. But it doesn't really happen that much. So I have to say, um, like I was listening to Melanie's uh, examples, that where she grew up, it also can be very geographical. And I do agree with that growing up from Australia. But interestingly enough, being over here in the US, having some of those other experiences, I've really been taken back because I've been looking at this group of people and thinking, I'm sort of cousins. We're cousins, kind of like it's not that far away. So I think that's something that I've also been mindful of, and that it can happen in any situation. So that's kind of surprised me. That was one of the things when you're not expecting it from a certain group of people, um, and that's I think it just goes back to sometimes there's some people that are just unhappy, and that just happens, and it's there's good and bad, and luckily there's mostly good out there. I think there's like 98% of the people are good-hearted. They're doing their best that they can. And that's where I like to situate my mindset, is that most people are good. And then it'll just be a little surprise to me if something is different to the good. That's all. But I am eternally an optimist, I have to say. And so I'm not going to change that just because of certain situations either. And I encourage everybody else not to change their mindset, to keep on, the hopeful about all humankind. And because we are all equal on so many different levels. um, we all have the same things. We have our family, we have our jobs. And so bringing those things together more so, and acknowledging that we are all similar but different, is going to be, I think, something that's going to unite us more. Just some of my thoughts. But I see there's some other people, some other friends. Sarah, Stephen, if you'd love to come up, or Success Minded, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I'm not sure who came up on stage first, but I'm going to go to Miss Super Nerd. Go ahead with your question or comment today. Are you there?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was desperately seeking my microphone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody in this space. There are a few pieces that were covered that I wanted to expand on. One of the things about empathy that I have learned, being what I call a DEI bully, is that empathy requires a level of awareness, a level of self-awareness about personal biases. You cannot truly be empathetic if you do not realize how you contribute to systems and experiences of people who are marginalized, if you do not recognize that your biases may have previously contributed or fed into the systems. So there's often a conversation about DEI, and people's default experience is always to look at it from a racial or a gendered perspective. One of the biases that often happen, especially with corporate leaders, is that gender is woman and man. And that assumption that everybody who shows up in a workplace or in an organization identifies as a woman or a man because that is biologically how they're born is a bias. And it may not necessarily be a malicious bias, but it is still a bias that often ostracizes and marginalizes people in organizations who may not have the same biological gender identity or identify themselves that way. It also lends itself to the cultural limitations that organizations often put on people. There was a gentleman who came up and asked Bobby about how to become a better communicator. All too often for immigrants, it doesn't matter whether you're an American moving to Australia, you're somebody coming from India moving to Canada. The assumption is if somebody isn't representative, whether it is by accent, physical presentation, personal dress, isn't representative of what is considered, in quotation marks, the cultural norm, then they are required to assimilate to the environment that they're in, whilst organizations preach this narrative about a globalized marketplace where we're all one big happy family. But there's certain people in the family who are still black sheep because they don't sound like us, they don't dress like us, they don't necessarily have the same cultural values as us. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, the call to action that I often have with organizational leaders is, how do you honor the differences in your employees in a way that is safe and equitable for the people who may not be culturally native to the environments that you're in, without appearing to pander? Because there is nothing worse than waking up with an organization that seems to change flags and colors every 15 seconds because somebody has held their feet to the fire, rather than making it a consistent aspect of the culture, saying we do not understand everybody's experience, but we would like to continue to integrate it into how we operate. And if we are operating in a globalized organization, truly globalized, then we need to recognize that honoring and investing in understanding these diverse groups within our organization is actually a benefit for us because it allows us global insight on marketplaces and white spaces that could potentially increase our ability to scale. And so I think that when we have these conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, even as a woman of color, I need to recognize my bias that I will walk into spaces and never think about somebody who cannot walk in. I just assume everybody can walk in. I will assume that because I can listen to a podcast, everybody can listen to a podcast. So closed captioning confuses me. I will assume that everybody who comes in a pair of heels was born a woman. And that may not necessarily be true. Or they may come in a pair of heels and not identify as a man or woman because they see themselves as pan. So, am I examining my own biases while in the midst of trying not to be victimized? And how does my advocacy include or inspire more realistic diversity, equity, inclusion? And the last thing that I will say is all too often, privilege creates a level of naivety that the world is really nice. And when you take a step back and you start to examine how many people do not have nice experiences, you'll realize that whether or not it is covert biases, implicit biases, or blatant biases, that the only way that you create a nice world where 99% of the people are kind is holding a feet to the fire of the people who aren't. Okay, that was interesting. But yeah, so
Sorry
I
about
think, oh no, it's perfectly fine. But I think that until I ask, for example, the gentleman who decided to have an outburst, why he feels like that and what makes him feel so unsafe that he chooses violence, whether it's verbal or physical as a default setting, then my bias is that that person should be dismissed. But they exist in the same world as me. And so what I would say is the uncomfortable conversations are necessary conversations if we want to be the change that we want to see. But the conversation starts with the man in the mirror. I'm done speaking.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love all your insights, everything you have to say. And wow, you should come more often to these spaces. We'd love to have you here to share your thoughts and share your point of view. So thank you so much for that. Um, it was funny that the person that I let up on stage, the reason I let him up on stage was because some people I don't let up on stage because they have no profile and they have no followers and they don't. I'm not sure whether they're here for real or not. But his said he was a Spaces host, and so I just couldn't believe that he just started blurring like that. So I mean, not much you can do about that. Um, but I do appreciate what you had to say there. So thanks so much for that. It looks like Daniel had to leave, but I was going to have him speak next. Indra or Melanie, anything you want to comment on?
I would just say that first of all, thank you for everything that you said. I mean, that's so. I mean, couldn't have, I haven't really heard it said in in the way that you've done for the way you did in quite some time. And I think that the biggest thing, and it got me thinking on several things as I've, kind of grown up in, through in my professional career from a recruiting standpoint, and being naive and not understanding that, people actually had, I mean, I've seen, I saw it firsthand, racism when I grew up, again, in a very, not a small town. It was very, we have a very diverse population. One side of the city is liberal, one side is Republican, and conservative. But I saw it firsthand. And I just, I think the biggest thing I'm trying to say here is that listening is really the superpower. And sometimes just listening and really listening and being present is what more people need to do to truly try to, again, understand, as you said, their own biases that they have, and working from within first, and then potentially reaching out and helping others. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. No, I appreciate it. And again, we're having a really great discussion on how to empower more diversity, equity, inclusion in work and life. I'm putting some of the tweets up above there, and this is a conversation that obviously we've been having for a long, long time. And the other thing I want to add that I think is incredibly important is that, given my own experience too of having been someone who, was so busy with work and so busy with my life and so busy with my kids and whatever what it may be, I was thinking, okay, yeah, I'm trying to raise my kids in this world, and I'm going to advocate for them and make sure they feel safe and whatnot. But at the same time, I think it's incredibly important for us to do the work, right? What are we doing to do the work? We have to advocate. We have to call things out. We have to put ourselves out there, and I think that's incredibly important. Like, what are you doing to be more of an advocate? What do you? Reading a post. One of my favorite content creators on LinkedIn. Her name is Elizabeth Liba, and she's always talking about systemic racism and black women and her journey as a black woman, a queer woman, and her content is just amazing. But one of the things she said, actually, I think it was today or yesterday, but she did a post where she said, "Allyship is a verb," right? So the idea is that you need to act, right? It's like you can't say, "Well, we have DI policies," or "I'm an ally," but okay, but what are you doing about it, right? What are you doing to educate yourself? What are you doing to act on that to support other people? When I see people, for me personally, when I see on Twitter people uh, sharing, transphobic, racist, Islamophobic content, I call it out and I go after those people and I say, listen, this is, and sometimes I try to explain them why they're wrong, but sometimes it doesn't work. But other times I just call it out. I think it's really important to put yourself out there, and you have to act. I think that a big part of it is, and I think that you did a really good job explaining this. A big part of it is we have to understand and learn where our blind spots are, where our biases are, our unconscious biases are, and then we also have to actually uh, put into action put things into action to try to make a difference. I think that's incredibly important because I think a lot of people forget about that or don't do that. And so, if we want to empower more diversity, equity, inclusion, it starts with each and every one of us to do the work, right? What are you doing to do the work? And I think that to me is incredibly important. So, we've gone on for a while now, for over an hour, and it's been a great discussion. I'm certainly welcome to take more people on stage if they want to ask a question. I'm also happy for anyone on stage if they want to share a thought. We do these tweet chats every week on Mondays at 11 a.m. Eastern. But I also do LinkedIn audio rooms on Tuesday, Thursday. I also do Clubhouse rooms. But for the most part, this is my weekly Twitter space here, and it's called the Power of Connection Chats. We take on topics specifically around power of connection. It could be community, relationships, branding, careers. There's lots of things I like to talk about. In fact, I'll let people know that later today at 2 p.m. Eastern, I'm actually doing a free workshop webinar on personal branding and thought leadership. So if anyone wants to know about it, let me find the tweet and I'll post it here in the nest. But in the meantime, I'd love to hear if anybody on stage wants to take the conversation in a particular direction or share a new insider nugget. And this also includes our two people who come up on stage as our guests. So anybody want to share a thought or move this conversation in a certain direction?
Yeah, I have a thought, Bobby, and it comes back to basically having empathy for everybody and also starting with kindness and empathy for ourselves. A lot of the time, if we are not giving ourselves self-care, if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not giving ourselves the patience, the kindness that we need, particularly with life, there isn't, I don't know anybody that doesn't have any challenges in life in general. I just don't. I wish I could say, oh, I know that, so and so just has an easy life. They're like ducks on a lake, they just glide across. But that really isn't the case. Everybody is going through something. And and we really do need to give ourselves time, patience, kindness, um, first, And then what happens is when we are feeling like our cup is full, then we can certainly extend outwards to everybody else. And that's just something else that I think is also important, that, you know, we are giving ourselves the kindness, the empathy, and everything else. And then when we're feeling good, like you find that you have more energy, even your mindset is capable of being more thoughtful to others, of going further, than just doing the basics, right? Than just saying, oh, thank you, or opening a door, whatever it is. It's actually going beyond that. It's being thoughtful to somebody. It's stopping and doing those little things that, say you're at a checkout and somebody looks really tired and they're busy doing their job. And it's about stepping beyond the boundaries of your comfort zone and asking them, how is their day? How's your day going? And I think I've probably even shared this before, but when you push past like just the basics of your day, you don't have to do those things, but it really does make others happy. It makes their day. And, I feel like it's putting out the good vibrations, the good vibes to others. Because I almost feel like we have to lead by example. So if we are wanting to make changes externally in the world and around us, we also have to make those changes. We have to set the example that we can do it ourselves as well. And that's really important, that others see us as a good example, and that so when we expect the same thing back, we're putting those vibrations and energy out into the world, basically. Um, but I think a lot of it starts with ourselves. And you might not think that you alone make a difference, but you do. Each of us, everybody in this entire room, thank you so much for being here to this important discussion, because everybody makes a difference. Every little thing that you do, the way you live your life, the way you are thoughtful to others externally, outside, inside this room, outside, it really does make a difference. So a lot of things start with us. And if we're willing to be open and change our perspective as well. So they're just some thoughts. Bobby, back over to you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I want to go over to Miss Super Nerd. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bobby. I'm really sad that Dan left because I wanted to talk about a bias that I had until I became the bias. Um, so I actually live in Canada, but I am the child of immigrants. And for those who are not familiar with how immigrant parents are set up, I grew up in an environment where either you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, a nurse, or some sort of scientist. And my brain never computed information the way that my siblings did or my parents did. It always seemed highly illogical. It wasn't until my mid 30s that I was diagnosed with ADD. And all of a sudden, it's like the world kind of opened up, but I had sat in leadership roles where I had to force logic in order to be functional in an organization. And I didn't understand why logic didn't show up in certain people. And I think one of the newer frontiers of the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation is the emergence and understanding of what the experience is for neurodiverse leaders and employees. What happens when you navigate the world in a way that is not considered traditionally logical or traditionally functional? And I think that and I really wish Dan was here because he is a neurodivergent recruiter, so he has an intimate understanding of it. But I think that when we have these conversations of diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's often from the perspective of what we can see and what we can hear, and not necessarily how we function from a professional perspective or even from a non-professional perspective. Because there are parents who will do homework with their children and fail to understand why their child is not processing information the way that they process information. Or there are teachers in the educational space who become frustrated with a student who is easily distracted or has a very divergent perspective because of their worldview. And I think that as somebody who's been diagnosed as being neurodivergent, it is empowering to recognize who I truly am in terms of how my brain functions. But it has also created a larger call to action for me in really investigating what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like when I'm sitting with a team and we're having a conversation, and I have to change the process of having a conversation with the team. Of I'm going to deliver all this information in the last 10 minutes. I'm going to get buy-in and stop and say, I would lose the train of thought 5 minutes in. So how do I, as a leader, now consistently create points of buy-in and points of understanding throughout the conversation? And for me, understanding how my brain worked and then understanding that I'm not the only person who has these experiences actually allowed me to become a better leader, because it made me change how I listened, and not just that I actively listened, but the way that I intentionally listened and the way that I intentionally facilitated conversations, because now I was the person who needed equity and inclusion. I was the person who needed a higher level of understanding and empathy. And there's something that my mentor once said to me: empathy is having the ability to to hold space for people who may not have the same experience as you. Compassion is the ability to hold space and then change those spaces so that they are safer and kinder for other people, because compassion requires action and support, whereas empathy requires presence and kindness. And I think that one of the biggest calls to action for me has been, number one, how do I empathize, which is how do I understand without necessarily being able to step into the shoes of this person? And then number two, how do I express compassion by not necessarily stepping into their shoes, but asking them, are the shoes the right fit? Do they provide you the level of protection and comfort and function in the environment that we exist in? How do I make sure that I remove roadblocks for you so that you can leverage those shoes to continue your journey successfully? And how do I ensure that I'm not the roadblock? But it's always fascinating when you realize that you were the roadblock that was blocking yourself and that has been blocking other people. And so I really wish that Dan was here to kind of have a more nuanced conversation about being neurodivergent, and then actually being in the recruitment space and having to have those conversations with employers of, I know this person looks like your diversity, equity, and inclusion metric, but you have somebody in your organization right now who should be in a leadership position because they understand a segment of your marketplace that may look like you but doesn't think like you. And how do you leverage that diversity of thought processing for your benefit? And in families and in the education space, my hope is that as more conversation happen, especially in the U.S. with the attempt to change how people with ADHD have access to medication and support, that parents and teachers will start to ask themselves, does my teaching style and does my parenting style create roadblocks? Or am I recognizing that my child, or this child that I educate, doesn't necessarily see the world the way that I do, and that is a gift to improve how I show up in the world? And then how do I remove those roadblocks and ensure that their shoes are the right fit for them and not just the right fit that I'm used to for me? I'm done speaking.
And
Yeah, thanks for
actually,
sharing that.
yeah, thanks so much.
Oh,
And I just want to jump in. Sorry, Bobby. I just got a note from Dan that he was actually removed from the space somehow, and so he couldn't get back in. So he would have loved to have jumped in on some of those points, particularly about neurodivergency. Yeah, he's trying to get back into the space at the moment. Sorry, Bobby, back over to you.
oh, I don't know what happened. I mean, Melanie and I have known Dan for a couple of years now, and
Yeah.
we've had numerous conversations around diversity and inclusion, particularly on Clubhouse at first, and then on LinkedIn Audio. So yeah, I mean, I wish we could get him up. I did invite him in the beginning to come up on stage, but I'm not sure what happened. Maybe
There's a glitch in the matrix, Bobby. At one
yeah.
point, I was hearing something, and I was like, "Is it me? Did I break Twitter? I promise I play nice with the other kids in the playground." So I think Twitter servers are actually going through some things, or Elon has broken them again.
Oh
Yeah.
dear. Oh dear. All right. Speaking of someone who could embrace more diversity, equity, and inclusion. All right. Let's go on to Evelyn. Welcome to the stage. Please go ahead and share your question or comment. Are you there, Evelyn? Go ahead. you're muted, so you have to unmute.
Yeah, Evelyn, it's on the left-hand side down at the bottom. Right down on the left-hand side, you have to hit the mic button.
I know where the
That's it.
fucking mute is. Sorry, I wanted to tweet more. LOL, it's just my style, you know? Are you there?
Yeah, we're here. Go ahead.
It's me, Evelyn.
Well, hello, Evelyn. Did you have something you want to share with us today?
I really want to code 0. I can't seem to find one. And Nathan Fielder, if you know where he is. Okay, I'm gonna go now. I want to put my makeup on and get ready. But I love you all. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you for coming by, Evelyn. Appreciate that. Okay, well, I think we've had, and again, we've had a really great discussion today, guys, and I appreciate all the people who've been sticking around for this. With quite a large room today, so that's kind of exciting and very, very appreciative. And of course, I always love the love. Love's a nice thing. So I'm happy to have more love in a room, which is great. Again, we do this every Monday at 11 a.m. And if you're welcome, if you want to come by, we'd love to have you there. Next month is actually Women's History Month, and so I'll be doing some more content specifically around empowering and supporting women voices as well, which I think is also important. I put in the tweet actually the tweet there. The latest tweet is that thing I'm doing at 2:00 today. If anyone wants to learn more about personal brand and thought leadership, how you want to step out and stand out as a leader in the digital space or in your business. I'm happy to have you guys come check it out because it is free, and you might as well get access to my trainings for free if you can, because versus paying, because it's a way to make it more accessible to folks. So you guys can check that out. I think we'd probably be best to have some closing thoughts now. So I'd love to. I'm going to start with my two guests actually. MJ, if you're able to, do you have any closing thoughts from our discussion today? If you're able to speak.
Hi. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I've been really, really grateful for everybody sharing their thoughts. I think in general, well, I agree with Indra that I'm also generally an optimist and do think more people are maybe good if you're going to put them in pockets like that. I think more people do want to be, when they come out of the womb, I think they all want to be loved and happy and kind. And so it's sometimes, it's easy to sort of fall your way down the rabbit hole when you start to see a whole lot of negativity in the world, or leaders maybe who we feel may be letting us down or whatever. So it's always really a blessing to come into spaces where people really are just trying to do their best for others. And it was a really respectful space too, which was lovely. And I appreciate everybody's contributions for sure. And thanks for letting me join in.
Thank you. I think a big part of it is, having inclusivity and being. I don't understand why people would not want to be respectful. I mean, having the best conversations like this, particularly on topics that are, I guess, sensitive for people. It's important to facilitate a space where everyone has a voice, and we try to have a cordial discussion about that. And those who don't want to do that, well, this is not really the space for that. Let's go to Miss Super Nerd. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, so I just keep saying Miss Super Nerd. But go ahead, and I'm from Canada too, so and Toronto. So why don't you go ahead and share any thoughts you might have.
I'm down the street from you. So my only thought would be a call to action to everybody to get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, and to continue to have those conversations about how your biases contribute to a lack of diversity, equity, inclusion. And then the second call to action is, as uncomfortable as you are, be unafraid to make leadership in the spaces that you're in uncomfortable, because their discomfort is where the breakthrough comes. And that's where that accountability starts to make the changes actually happen, because you're the first change that you want to see. And I believe Indra said that. And then the last thing that I would say is I'm grateful to Bobby for facilitating a space like this. Diversity, equity, inclusion is something that I've become highly passionate about as a woman of color in tech. And it's something that I'm obsessed about, as AI starts to kind of hijack the tech reality, and the metaverse starts to become a conversation about how accessible and safe these new spaces and these new tools will be for users. So yeah, just get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's kind of like going to the gym after not going to the gym for 10 years. Eventually the muscles stop hurting and you become stronger in what you're training. And the more that you train that diversity, equity, and inclusion muscle, and the more that we become stronger in it as a global community, the more that we actually authentically become a global community. But oh, Canada, and I'm done.
Love that. Thank you. Melanie, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just, the fact that we have so many people that came in and listened to this conversation and, honestly try to take one thing away and, truthfully look at yourself. Take some time to look and see where, I promise you have an unconscious bias. We actually all do. And it's okay to admit that. And, it's okay to say like, wow, I didn't realize that I had this or that's how it's showing up. And then, recognizing that as something to continuously work and improve upon. And on that note, I'm actually getting ready. I have to jump off because I have to prepare a client for an interview, which is going to be solely focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is going to be what the interview is about. So, so I have to jump off and get ready for that. But I just, again, thank you everybody for coming and listening. And yeah, take some sort of action. But I think that action needs to probably be all of us can do a little bit better job internally in how we show up, and start from there. So I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Melanie. Indra, final thoughts.
Okay, well, first of all, Bobby, thank you for holding this space. And the topic is really, really powerful, and it can help all of us. It doesn't matter um, what we are dealing with in life. We all have certain things that we need to be aware of. And I think the main thing is that um, communication is huge. That if we see something, um, we take action, that we are supportive to others who are having difficulties in any of these areas and just across the board in life. And also there were so many great points raised by all the speakers here today. I have to really say that uh, you know everything was helpful, supportive, and there are different types of ways that we can empower not just ourselves but others. So to think outside the box of, well, how can I support this person if you do see that they're having a difficult point, uh, they're having a difficult time, and nobody is completely powerless. Like you might think, okay, well, I can't make any major decisions to help somebody, but you can make their day better. You can even make their moments better by being that person, by doing your part in raising yourself, raising your vibration and being supportive to others. Being supportive, being a friend is one of the biggest things that you can do out there in the world, even if you can't reach to the higher levels where things are out of your control. There's only a certain amount that is within our control. And so don't waste your energy in, okay, torturing yourself. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. Do the things that you can do. And they are really big things as well, particularly when you go out of your way to help others, to have empathy, to be considerate, to be thoughtful. All these things are within our reach. These things are the things that can make a difference to somebody's life. So, even it's, that saying about it's the little things in life. Well, I'm just going to go finish on that note that it really is the little things in life that can make a huge impact, a huge difference. And it can almost start, an effect of spreading to everybody else. You can set the example, you can set the tone, you can do good things, you can say good things, you can be an example, and that can really start so many other things off. You can set the example where others will feel that they could also be a little bit more kinder, a little bit more thoughtful, and go out of their way. So thank you so much, Bobby. I'm signing off. The Positivity Vibe Tribe will be back on Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're doing part two of the Beginner's Positivity Guide. and that will be at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I will be there with my co-host, Stephen J. Caggiano, who's right here, listening and supporting the space. And then Thursday, Positivity Vibe Tribe will be hosted also with Success Minded, who is also in the space at the moment. So looking forward to seeing everybody in our Positivity Vibe Tribe spaces. And until then, sending you all love, light, and blessings.
Thank you so much, Indra. And I want to make a note for everyone to make sure you follow Indra, follow the other speakers that come on stage, support what they're doing. They're doing some really great work and sharing some great things. The diversity, equity, inclusion aspect of work and life is a challenge for all of us. And I think that the first thing is empathy to help us listen and to understand one another, particularly those who are struggling. Listen to their stories, empathize with what they're going through, try to understand what they're feeling and how we can support those feelings. Compassion is acting in kindness and love and support to try to help these people or help the cause move forward. So when you see things happening, you need to call it out. And I think as a leader, I'm big on thought leadership. We need to step up and call things out and stand up and speak up and be a voice and empower those voices. And for me, the power connection is about, connecting ourselves to connect with others so that we can actually make the world a better place. And so I think it's inherent upon all of us to educate ourselves, understand our cognitive biases, and then speak up and support those who are more marginalized and oppressed than we are, and continue to have conversations like this and keep acting on it. So I want to thank all the speakers for being here. And if you like the replay, the replay will be available. If you found some really great insights here, you can certainly take a picture of the space. You can put it out there on Twitter or on LinkedIn or Instagram. Share the knowledge, share the love, share the insights of what people are getting out of the space. I think that would go a long way to helping everybody. Share your top 3 insights. Tag me. If you tag me, I'll see it. I'll retweet to my 500,000 followers, which will bring more awareness to the world. It might bring you some more followers. So I think it's a win-win for that. If you want to learn more about what I'm doing, again, I have my personal branding webinar, free webinar today at 2:00. I also run rooms on LinkedIn Audio on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And of course, I run lots of things actually. So you're welcome to just check out my profile and see all the things that I'm up to here on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So with that, have yourself a wonderful week. Wish you guys all the best, and I will see you guys soon. Take care.